Hey everyone, I'm Jason Shum, and welcome to the September AnimChallenge review. I looked at all the submissions. The topic for September's challenge was video game emotes, and looked at all the submissions and was blown away by the appeal and the entertainment value and just the quality of all the submissions. Well done to everyone who submitted some work. Really entertaining. The winner ended up being Leônidas Maciel. Congratulations, Leônidas. He did a kind of Lego / Overwatch animation. Really awesome stuff. I've watched it like a million times already, and yeah, super entertaining. So again, congratulations, Leônidas. I'm gonna do a review of that animation. Before I get into that, I'll do just a quick introduction about myself. Like I said, my name is Jason Shum. I've been in the animation industry for about 19 years or so. Started out working at a little studio called Volition back in 2000, working on PS2 launch titles like Summoner and Red Faction. And then I went to Pandemic Studios, spent 9 years there working on video games such as Mercenaries, Destroy All Humans, Saboteur, Clone Wars. And then I kind of left games for a little bit, went to work in VFX animation, VFX movies, and cinematics. So I worked at a bunch of different VFX studios around LA, working on different types of movies, commercials, and then kind of did like cinematic commercial work at places like PSYOP and Blur Studio. Worked on different cinematics there, which I thought was really cool. Kind of like hone my craft outside of video games, and just kind of expose myself to different workflows. I really missed working in video games, so I went back to games after a few years, and worked at places like Spark Unlimited, Ready at Dawn, Riot Games, Amazon, Blizzard, working on games such as The Order 1886, Ninja Gaiden Z, League of Legends, and all different experiences, all different styles of games, and that's what I love to do, is just kind of expose myself to different styles and different genres, and after 19 years still continue to keep learning and keep hustling and keep improving and all that stuff. So but yeah, that's kind of me, and let's jump into the review right now. Okay, let's jump into the review for the winning entry. This is Leônidas' animation. I'll play it through a few times here. And like I said, just amazing work all around. And it's challenging to do these kind of reviews for this kind of animation, because it's just already just like this nice finessed polished piece. But a lot of the notes that I'll be giving will be kind of like different polished stuff, and a couple directional notes that maybe a different creative choice, something to think about for next time. I think just kind of overall, you've hit on this really cool kind of like Lego style. It's almost like if we were to make like a Lego Overwatch game, or if someone was to make a Lego Overwatch game, this would kind of be, the blueprint in a way. You've really hit on that kind of like, keying on twos, kind of holding kind of like step mode in certain places, that kind of like animating on twos style for Lego, but also that stylistic feel for Overwatch style as well. So yeah, definitely done your research, and it really shines through in the final animation. And also you have like a bunch of different people supporting you on the VFX and modeling side as well. I can see in your credits here. So well done to everybody. The overall idea of it is awesome, amazing. With the topic of it being video game emotes, if I was like being a real stickler for things, it's kind of like it really toes the line of what an emote is, because typically a video game emote is like something that you play in a game, and is very much viewable from 360 degrees, all different kinds of camera angles. You're doing kind of some interesting stuff here where you're kind of getting close to the camera on some of these shots, which typically doesn't happen in Emote, but we're not being total sticklers here. So this kind of falls more like in a kind of like Overwatch play of the game type of thing, which allows you to have like custom cameras. So probably you didn't want to animate the camera to kind of stay within the rules of that. But I think if you were to like take this and plus it up and do another pass on it, it's possible that you could probably do some stuff with the camera that would make it feel a little bit more lively, because you're not necessarily you don't need to stay in the rule set of this challenge anymore after this. So my general kind of thing is like I would love to see some kind of like delay on the camera as it goes over here. Maybe it like overshoots a bit. The camera kind of overshoots a bit going that way, and just kind of a general, not like super handheld feel, but like even right here, maybe it does a little camera shake as it goes in here. So that's kind of like an overall camera note. As for the overall kind of like direction of it, I love every single move, like the beats of it and everything. My biggest thing is probably the start and the finish. So the start, this kind of whole start pose, and then the way it finishes. I think that's probably the parts where I would probably try to plus a little bit more, and I'll kind of go into that right away here. So like something like this, like when I look at this pose compared to this one, compared to this one, compared to this one, this one is like a little bit more static, and it totally fits like the Lego thing and everything like that. But like I'm kind of thinking about this in the context of like what makes it cool, and inevitably the comparison of what Tracer is in a Lego world, right? So I think I would probably kind of try to start out in a more like looking at some research of how Tracer maybe is like, maybe like it's like just kind of a little bit like of a clearer silhouette. So like it's kind of doing something like this. Maybe that's a bit too extreme, bent back, but like the head is more like this. It's some kind of like more clear silhouettes on the guns, and just kind of like either doing something like that, or she's maybe kind of like turned away from you a little bit so that her hip is like this, and this is her back actually, so that her front leg, her left leg is like this, and her back leg is kind of like this. And as she's kind of like rotated back, she's turning her head and staring back at you in a way, so that this arm comes out like this, and then maybe the back one has a nice kind of back silhouette like that. So her chest is actually here, this is her back, and she's probably like, from your original angle, she's probably rotated like 90 degrees that way. So it's kind of like she's kind of like looking at you like this in a way. So the original pose is like she's like this, looking like this, like her face and her chest is everywhere, is just kind of like facing that way, and just kind of like getting some contrast in the chest and the head, so that her chest is maybe that way, but her head is kind of like staring at you like this, as much as you can in that kind of Lego pose, or the second pose where she's like 90 degrees back and she's kind of like this in a way, right? So starting it like that I feel like it would just pop out to me a little bit more, and maybe you were thinking like, oh, this would be like a game idle. So start from a game idle pose, which I think you'd be probably correct in doing. But you know, for this purpose, it's like, hey, let's just make it cool, right? Let's do like a really dynamic pose, because this kind of pose is not necessarily like the two poses that I'm proposing. Is not necessarily like how you would start a video game idle, because it's just almost video game idols. They shouldn't be like super dynamic because it's hard to get in and out of them sometimes. Depends on the style of the game, but for this kind of like standalone thing, I think it'd be a cool thing to kind of start out in. And then as you kind of stay in this pose here, and you kind of go like, I love these transitions, what you're doing here. Like the VFX supports it in a great way. Like you're doing, you're kind of doing this lean, you know, everything, like it's almost like this point's being pulled that way, and then everything's just kind of like, everything is kind of going along for the ride, which is great. Love it. And then the guns drag, which is awesome. And then, like I said, the VFX supporting it, which is like the VFX kind of like transposes itself out first while your pose is still kind of like hung back here. And this is a great dragging pose. I love all this stuff. My thing is like, even though it's kind of meant to be like kind of, what's the word? Like it just kind of hits, like the pose is supposed to just hit. I would try to kind of overshoot this just a little bit, like where this pose that hits in here, the hip is up here and the chest goes up and everything kind of just like pops up just a bit. This is stretching a little bit. This is still dragging like that. So that it pops up and then settles back down into this pose. So it kind of does like that in a way, right? And the cool thing is like your gun could be like this here, so that even though the body is like popping up and then back like this, the gun is just doing this. So you get this kind of like nice kind of contrast. So not everything's popping up, but like this is popping up, but this is kind of moving up as you settle into this pose. And then I think the guns themselves, like I would just kind of angle this one just a little bit more so we can kind of see it just a little bit more like that. So it's not so kind of like, it's more like this and not just kind of like that in a way on screen. Same with this. I would probably cheat it so that it rotated itself kind of more like that in a way, just so I can kind of see the shape just a tiny bit more. Yeah, even for this one here, I'd probably try to, maybe I'd still flip it this way so that it, when it comes down here, it can still pop over here and still be okay. I love the stillness of it when you're juggling. It's like we're only paying attention to the guns, which is great. It's shows nice control over like, you know, what you want people to focus on. So that's great. The whole juggling part is great. Like this drag here is awesome. That pulling on going into this pose here. And I think for this one, I would probably, I like the way the guns are dragging here. And then, you know, this arm is getting left behind. This gun is here like that. I would like to see this drag just a little bit more like that. So it's kind of like just goes in. This one can just be like back here, like same as it is now, but maybe just a tiny bit of offset between the two weapons. And then you could always have it so that when it goes here, when it hits here, this one's just a little bit lower. It's like down here, and then it pops up to this one. So it's just kind of like, it kind of shows that shows that lag just for a couple frames. This little kind of like, here, let me play it in real time. It kind of does like a subtle, like, it's really cool. It's just like a subtle, boop, pops over here. I would maybe try to play it up just a little bit more so that when it goes from here to here, oops, goes from here to here, that when it jumps down here, you could keep the hip same as it is now, but like maybe if you can cheat the head just a little bit so that it drops down into the body, it kind of like does something like this, and then this leg just kind of pops up just a little bit. Same with this one. It kind of just like compacts a little bit and then pops into this one a bit more, right? So that it kind of goes like this foot, this one, and then out to here. So it kind of does like something like that. I think that might kind of like add just a little bit of kind of like squishiness to it without it feeling like too mushy, right? I think like for me, the juggling and then this shooting part are like two of the really strongest parts. It's just like they just feel really tight, and there's just the beats on it are feel really nice. And then the way you exit out of this is nice because you drop down and then you just like push up and just like rocket out of there, right? And as you come in here, this is great. The VFX once again supports it, where it kind of like comes in first and then comes in like this. Now, this is a super tiny thing, but like as it comes in, I can see the mouth. It when it comes in, it compresses, like it's coming this way. The mouth compresses. As it comes up, it widens big, and as it settles to that. I would like to see all this mouth animation that you've done here. Just maybe try to delay it like a frame or two, like another kind of like held frames or two. So it's like when it comes in, as you come up, it's still like down here, and then as you drop up, it's like opening, and then when you hit here, it settles in like that. So it's kind of like, it's just kind of like this super subtle offset to it. Just to see how that feels. And then as you exit out of here, I'd probably say like maybe you have your arm here. It's like the VFX is there. As you pull out here, the next one, maybe your arm is still just a little bit like this. So we can see like it kind of like lagged a little bit behind the head just for like a couple frames, right? And as you drop in here, I think this probably is maybe my kind of biggest note about it, which is, you know, kind of how I mentioned, like the start pose could be a little bit more dynamic. I think the end pose, this kind of general idea here, like first off, I want to say I was showing this to my kids, my two kids, and they were like cracking up. So, you know, well done. It's just like, you know, that's my goal, is to try to make my kids laugh with my animation. So you did it, and it's awesome. So my kind of critique on it is that I like the idea too. I just think that like if we're gonna sew it all up and sew it up all together again, to kind of bring it back to this pose is what you have here. It's like, let's try to like make that idea not so, in my head at least, not so abrupt in the way it's like finishing and then just being like, okay, now let's just reset kind of thing, right? So I guess to kind of break that down a little bit more is like, she loses her arms, the guns disappear, which is fine, you know, it's totally fine. It's but she's looking down at them, and then when she goes into this, it's like she's got them back, and it's like there's a part of me that kind of wonders like, oh, could we like add a little beat there where we can kind of like I said, kind of sew that story up, where she gets the guns back somehow, or her arms back somehow through her own through like something that she did, as opposed to just being like, oh, reset, her arms are back kind of thing. So how would I go about doing this? I think the first thing is the general pose of it. The way the arms are is great. I think I'm trying to think of like what she would be doing if she had her arms, right? Like she lands very kind of like straight, and kind of straight and symmetrical to the camera. Everything's very even. So what would our arms be doing? Would they be like just kind of offset with the guns like this? Would they be, would they be kind of like out like this? Or what would they be doing, right? So when I think about like what the kind of pose would be, I kind of think about Tracer in general, and like if she were to land, would she just land like this, or would she like try to land in this type of like, maybe a cooler type of pose, right? So if I were to say like, oh, maybe she could land in a cooler type of pose, and then the kind of one of the typical kind of like Tracer poses is like she's like just kind of forgive my drawings, but she's like one gun here and then like one gun out like this. Like she likes to do that kind of stuff. So maybe she would land let me dump this frame. If she were to land, the thing is like I also see a lot of like this part here, and it's like it feels like this feels a little I don't know, it feels not as appealing as it could be. So even this kind of like part here. So how would I mitigate that? I guess I would when she first lands in, I would probably rotate this so that this one drops in first, or this one could be dropping in as well, but like it's very much like rotated so that you're seeing kind of like a more dynamic angle to it. And as it comes in, that means this one is rotated as well, like that maybe, right? Which means the head would probably be more like this, something like that, right? So that gives me kind of like this kind of like twist on the whole pose, as opposed to everything kind of coming in very straight, right? And again, like that could be your intention, that it was meant to be straight, but this is just kind of a different take on it. So as it comes in, I guess my goal of that is for it to land in this type of pose, which is like, where's the one I drew? The one I drew was like this, right? So like it's the hip is rotated like this. This leg is actually out here like this. This leg is in the back like this, right? And then hopefully you can kind of see with that red there, the body is twisted that way, right? So the left side of her body, it would be kind of like would be where her gun's in, and her right side of her body would be where the other gun is. So it's kind of like boom in a way, and that means her head would be either twisted like this to kind of be like bang like that, or some kind of like nice flowing line of action there, right? So if she was to hit like this, these could just stay here the way they are. But if she were to land like that, that means that going back to here, it would, for me, fix a lot of this stuff, which is like when she lands, she's rotated so that her head's this way. This is that. And then like even this is kind of squished like this. And then as this kind of is looking up, it's kind of like this, right? So we're getting this kind of like twist on the body that's happening. And then as it hits here, it's still twisting. Everything's twisting at this point, right? Going into landing in this type of pose. And that way, when she sits in here this whole time, she can still do all this. This is hilarious, like a really good kind of like timing on the facial expressions and poses. But she could still be like twisted that way, and she's kind of like whoop, whoop, like that. And then, if I were to kind of think about this more in terms of like getting it back to this, I would maybe add a beat here where she does something like she looks, she's looking at that, she's looking at this, and then she kind of does like a small antic where she lowers her body down a little bit more. This leg bends like that. This leg is really compacted, and as she kind of like bends down, her face is kind of like, that kind of like grimace. Maybe she's like either eyes closed or something like that. I think you had some kind of pose like that before. Basically, she goes from like ooh to be like really quickly, right? And then it's kind of like her being like, okay, I'm going to like use whatever energy I have to kind of get my arms and my guns back and teleport, time travel to back to this kind of pose, right, where she was all good. So she kind of is like, she's like, hey, look at me, no, oh boy, and then kind of grimace real quick, and then that allows her to teleport. There's intention on this teleport here, to basically be like, okay, now I'm going to go back to this, which actually will end up being this pose, one of these poses, right? And let's just say either of these poses, they're both kind of facing this way. That leads my energy to be, when I'm doing this, maybe, even though Trisha doesn't really do this kind of stuff, it's like maybe she does a 360 into that, right? So like instead of that kind of like move that she's doing now, which is kind of just like moves over here, maybe she starts to tilt her body this way, right? And she starts to really rotate. Maybe her head is like still lagging back there, but like her body is starting to make the turn to go that way, so that instead of her just being like here and just like boop, 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 and then going into this, she kind of like, with the support of the VFX that you have, it's more like she kind of goes like, she starts like this, and then she kind of goes to kind of like spin into the end pose. So it kind of gives you like a nice ending to everything, and hopefully that's not too overplayed, because it's possible that it could be, too much animation in there. But it would be interesting to kind of see that kind of move, and it'll allow you to like spin into this pose, either one of these poses, so that your end pose, like as you kind of like spun around, your these guns are lagging, and as they go into like that final pose, it's kind of like lends itself into those poses. So like the body hits and it's like boom boom like that in a way. And obviously you would kind of do it in the Lego style where it's like, it really snaps into it. That's kind of like my biggest note is the end part of it. Okay, that does it for the review. Congratulations again to Leônidas for an amazing submission, and I loved watching it. I loved reviewing it, and congratulations to everyone who submitted an entry. Super entertaining to watch. And for anyone who wants to get in touch with me, ask questions on anything, you can reach out to me on social media at Shumface. My website is jasonshum.com. I also have animation tutorials that I teach on Gumroad. You can just search for those. It should come up. And that's it. Thank you, everyone.